one thing is very sure that whatever the session, the post-lunch session is obviously the most difficult one. Even my friend Prakash Nanda is willing to concede that. So friends, without much ado, we are going to be talking in the post-lunch session on a subject which gives us all lunch and gives us all reasons to celebrate luncheon celebrations. I have with me a very, very distinguished economist, Dr. Mridul Saggar. Mridul has been the RBI chair professor, am I right, sir? NCAER, yeah, RBI as well. And he is been a central banker and was the ED of the RBI, and he's been a member of, one of the members of this RBI's monetary policy, member of the Financial Markets Commission, and has been on various task forces. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Saggar. And I have the very great privilege of inviting my friend, Vipin Sondhi. Vipin is from Jalandhar and I am from Kapurthala, so very closely connected to each other. And apart from that, there are many, many, many things. And he is also instituted in his time. You instituted the JCB Award?
No, for literature.
For literature, yes. And he, the most well-endowed award in the country, the JCB Award, has been created by him. I wish I had met him 10 years earlier. Then maybe we would have got a share of that pie. But without much ado, let me invite Dr. Mridul Saggar to talk to us about the Indian economy, about the overview of the Indian economy. You see, I can't decide whether I'm happy that Bharat is here or not here, because that gives us more time. And in an event where we are running out of time, I think this gives us the advantage of, hearing you now, sir. I extend your time to 10 minutes.
Okay.
to give you an overview, and
fine.
then we'll have a conversation. It also gives us the opportunity of an engaged conversation. And, because many thoughts have come about in the morning sessions, we'll carry on with those conversations and thoughts. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, and I'm pleased to be here on your invite. Let me straight away very quickly give you a broad backdrop of what's happening on the economy side today. I would more like to have a conversation later, so I'll try to be brief. So one thing we need to be very conscious about is that the global growth after a steep pandemic, post-pandemic recovery, it's not post-pandemic in the sense pandemic has not been called off as yet, but we have learned to live with pandemic, and therefore economies have bounced back and they have recovered. And what we are now seeing is a massive sort of global inflation with which it is becoming hard to cope. And clearly there is very little choice left but to slow down the growth. And unfortunately, this is how the monetary policy works, because what you need to do is to sort of, with demand running ahead of supply, the only way that can then happen is that the prices can rise to clear the markets. And this is very unfortunate that we now have to sort of hike rates and therefore slow down the economy so that we can soft land from there. Now, what has happened is that the global growth was of an order of 6.2% in 2021, when economies recovered from the post-pandemic period, like the recovery in demand, especially even stretching to the services sector, was very visible. And the economy is expected, the global economy is expected to slow down to 3.2% this year and further to 2.6% next year. And these are the latest October IMF projections. Actually, the global growth could slow down more than what the IMF is predicting. What we are seeing now is a possibility of a recession into the US economy as well as the Euro area economy. The two regions will go into recession next year. I'm not saying it's a certainty, but it is a very high probability now. And it is simply because the Federal Reserve Board, the FOMC, is raising rates. The committee, the Monetary Policy Committee, they're hiking federal fund policy rate. It has gone up to 3.75%. And I don't see that stopping before 5%. It could be 5, 5.5, And clearly inflation is intransigent, it is sticky, it will last. And possibly we'll have to live with high interest rates for a period of time. In India also, we have had consecutive breaching of the inflation target corridor. There is a tolerance band set 2 to 4%, but our inflation last month was 7.4%. So it was nearly double the target, little less than that. But in advanced economies, the inflation is running 4 times the target, 5 times the target in UK. And this global inflation has essentially come because of the fragmentation we are seeing in the world today. The geopolitics has taken over. We have the Ukraine war. So supply chains are disrupted. There is a shipping shortage, which is the container shortage, which has now come down quite a lot. But actually speaking, the freight rates are still double the pre-pandemic level. They had risen to 8 times the pre-pandemic level when this spike occurred, and especially from the sea routes which come from China. They are most affected in terms of the supply chains. And we heard the chip shortages being talked of in the previous session. It is a very serious thing which has run into our automobile industry and a whole range of electronic industries. So industry is contracting. But let me be blunt, like our growth and our inflation is not just global. It's also a making of our own. So one is the food prices have been pretty high, and food inflation has been pretty much, how much time I have used for something? Yes.
Another 3-4 minutes.
Okay. So food inflation is the main driver for our inflation. And apart from the food, the oil, the global oil prices spiked. If you see the global commodity prices, there was a whole range of problems. The fertilizer, for instance. Fertilizer prices had skyrocketed after the Ukraine war. So was the case with coal, steel. Most of them are now coming down. For fertilizer, the government came into the picture and didn't allow the pass-through to occur to the Indian economy, because fertilizer prices were kept low because they borne it on the fiscal through higher subsidies. But there are limits to the fiscal also. And what we are facing now is our debt to GDP ratio had climbed to nearly 90% in 2020 when pandemic struck us, and then on a better growth, this has come down to 84%. But a hard metrics say that debt levels will fall very slowly from here. And if there are growth shocks, there could be sustainability issues which can come in. So we have to be very cautious over how much we spend on the fiscal side. The fiscal space is often not created in India because in good times we relish. So we don't do the hard work to create fiscal space so that we can pump prime economies when downturns occur. So growth in India would also slow down. Growth could probably be sub 7 this year, maybe even to 6.7% or so. The government estimates are a little higher. Next year we will be lucky to get 6% plus growth, but I think we could still grow for around 6%, which won't be a bad number. We will still be the fastest growing economy in the world. So we have this perspective. We are already like the 5th largest economy in the world in terms of dollar GDPs. We are the 3rd largest in terms of PPP GDP. So size is not the issue. We have the geostrategic power, but our per capita incomes are still among the lowest in the G20. So let me leave it at here. We'll take the discussion later on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saggar. And I think it's very important that we get in Mrs. Sondhi at this point. So the key takeaway is that, yes, the growth is going to be less than 7%, but it will still be the fastest growing economy in the world. And that with this sort of a growth rate, we can really plan our geostrategic initiatives in a much better way. So thank you very much. And Vipin, over to you. I would, from here, please let us know that if this be the state of Indian economy, what do you see as the relationship between the economy and the strategic growth, especially, and I'd like you to focus on the manufacturing sector, you know, in a big way, because you've been in manufacturing. You know, he's been in almost all the large auto sector, you know, facilities in this country. And also, I mean, how do we put defense in the manufacturing space of India? The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Sanjeev. I'm not sure the mic is working, but
Take this one.
okay. General Pannu, Sanjeev, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great privilege to be here, and good afternoon, everybody. Also want to thank my colleagues from the CII and also from the Quality Council of India, Manpreet and Sanchit, who are here, who've contributed towards making my address. I also want to congratulate the Valley of Words. In modern times, the military forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, or now cyber or space, they don't alone go to war. We discussed this, General Pannu and Sanjeev. Nations go to war. And therefore, it's extremely critical that nations are strong economically. And when Mridul, you mentioned that we may not, growth may be 6%, but it's amongst the fastest. That's very positive. And I'd like us to see a 25-year perspective, because if we're going to develop the relationship in terms of a military-industrial complex, we've got to make sure that we are progressing over the next 25 years and we don't ask the same question that we are asking today. Economy, critical civilian infrastructure like roads, rails, bridges, etc. These support the economy while war is on, and this in turn is part of the war machinery, and they're not geographical features, they get targeted during a military incursion. Thus, industry, economy, and military power of a nation are intertwined like never before, and an integral part of any nation's progress, certainly our nation's progress. And to build a strong military, we have to have a strong economy, which itself is to be built on vibrant, sustainable, technologically contemporary, multi-sector industries. You've got to be strong right across the board. And once this hypothesis is proven, and actually we don't have to look very far. If we look at the present-day military powers, or the powers that were, Germany, Britain in their sense, but USA and now China, all have had strong economies and have built strong militaries as well. So I will respond, Sanjeev, as you asked, to relationship between the security of the nation and the economy. Now, the causal relationship between economic performance and security, national security, has both an intuitive appeal that stronger the economy, stronger the military, and vice versa. It's conceptually correct, empirically also correct. And World War II saw it to us. We saw that during World War II. But, you know, Sanjeev, the immediate session before this, and I was a little disappointed, but I wasn't able to meet the concerned person when we spoke about our incapability to make hair dryers. Now, we don't have to run ourselves down all the time. The point really is that I think Germany's war economy chief and General Pannu and this, you know, military strategists here, I think the US economy was at that time described as not capable of making razors and refrigerators. That was what the Germans described the Americans as. And they came out very, very strongly. I'm sure over 25 years, we will definitely make a difference. One of the things that we've got to see in terms of a strong economy is the low defense to GDP ratio, the low defense expenditure, the GDP ratio. The more wealth we generate as part of the economy, the more wealth there will be for distribution to people who deserve it, which is the underprivileged, and for securing our borders. It's important to generate this wealth. And our Arthashastra, going back, I think Governor Ravi spoke a lot about our history, but when you look at national security being a blend of political resilience and maturity, human resources, economic structure and capacity, technological competence and industrial base, and availability of natural resources and military might. Now that was written in the Arthashastra centuries ago. Therefore, for the country of our size, our aspirations, national security is much more than just homeland security. It's about our power to influence major events in the immediate and the extended neighborhood around the world. Our economic security is therefore a pillar of national security. Now, future of India as a manufacturing hub, and I will not intertwine it at this point with defense, but generally to grow our capability to manufacture. You've got Mr. Trivedi sitting here, and he knows a lot more than I do about it. But the importance of manufacturing in enhancing our economic security. We've got to build it. We had the opportunity, it got built, but we've got the next 25 years to focus on that. And I think we can look at about 4 things that we can look at optimistically. Not everything is good, but we can look at optimistically. One, we have to increase India's manufacturing share in GDP from 16% to 25%. Now that's a goal, and there are some steps being taken towards that goal. The second is manufacturing generates high quality jobs. We have no option. We have to create these high quality jobs or we have a social problem. We are a young country. We need good quality jobs. Third, India is a consumption-led economy, with consumption accounting for approximately 60% of our GDP. Good quality jobs are therefore critical to ensure that this positive consumption cycle continues and leads to economic growth and therefore more manufacturing. And fourth, in addition to economic growth, we must cut down on non-essential imports. And if I might hark back on things like hairdryers, etc. It isn't difficult, it is easy to do that. But India currently imports a lot of non-essential imports. There are ways around it. But we also import defense equipment, we also import heavy machinery, we also import toys. So there is a great opportunity and some steps are being taken. But we also make the world's best automobiles in many ways, and if I might say, heavy construction equipment as well. So the time has come now to realize this opportunity, and I think it was very well said in the previous session that global supply chains are key. Amongst friendly nations, global supply chains are key. We cannot manufacture everything else. Now, how do we prioritize the manufacturing sector? A lot is being spoken about it by the government, but also by industry. Now, while rapid growth in the services sector, we've seen services go ahead and actually leapfrog manufacturing. And we've had a number of people in Parliament saying that we need a strong manufacturing industry, and I completely agree with that. When you look at what happened to the services industry from the 1990s, it just went ahead, almost 58%, as I mentioned. Now, the question really is, what happened when COVID hit us? It was the service sector that got hit very badly. Travel, tourism, hotels, where we are staying here, millions thrown out of jobs. The manufacturing sector, somehow or the other, continued to manufacture except for those 2 or 3 months. So it's extremely important that we get our manufacturing industry when you have these black swan events. There's a Morgan Stanley report of 3 days ago, 4 days ago, again, very optimistic, and well, they may be optimistic for their reasons, but a number of people do think that if we take the opportunity, it is India's decade or India's next 25 years. While laying the groundwork for the groundbreaking ceremony for a manufacturing facility, the Prime Minister said, this was, I think, the C-295 medium transport plane, that we must make in India. And whatever we do, we must make it for the world. I think our mindset has to be that we have to make global scale, global quality. And we'll come to that when we come to defense. It's important to be able to export. Indian firms have expanded their global reach. There's a strong, reasonably strong export performance, but I'd again request you to look further for the next 25 years. We've got policies now by the government, and I think 3 of them I'd like to mention. One, the productivity-linked incentive scheme for the first time is not a giveaway. It is not a SOP. It is, if you meet capability, If you bring in technology of the future, electric vehicles, hydrogen, anything else, you will get incentive. If you generate X number of jobs, you will get incentive. If you, let's say for the auto sector, invest 5,000 crores in 5 years, you'll get the incentive. Otherwise, you won't get the incentive. There's a push for manufacturing logistics infrastructure. We spend almost 13% on logistics. You cannot be competitive. But I think with a proper policy which has been enunciated, we should look at that. And the third positive is ease of doing business. Running a manufacturing organizations, especially MSME, we've got to laud it to them. It is, despite all the problems, they still run an MSME. So I think these are three important things that we can move forward with as industry. Now, defense industry as a part of economic growth, and I think that is extremely important. Nations have developed the 5 forces, one in each domain: land, sea, air, cyber, and space. But the 6th one is the military industrial complex. There has to be close cohesion, and close cohesion right across the board. And that's what we must endeavor to build in the next 25 years. That is an overall subset of a nation's industrial capability. To develop and sustain it, government, defense forces, industry must come together, and we will need the government's indulgence, if I might say, and support through R&D funding and the development of manufacturing technologies. And we've seen it around the world. If we think that the top American companies today, which are in defense, you take any of them, General Atomics, all of them actually, or Germany, Thyssen, they were all supported by their governments for almost 5 decades. And this is where they are. And maybe we can look at something that we can work while leaving entrepreneurship moving forward. Israel is doing the same thing, as I understand. So without a competitive defense industry, along with a manufacturing industry, we will not be able to build this military industrial complex. And we've got some examples right now. We've got the Akash air defense missile systems. We've got BrahMos. I don't know whether they are the best in the world, but we are making progress, definitely. The MOD has also come up with certain schemes and certain initiatives. I think the defense production and export promotion policy is a good policy that we can work with going forward. What's important is global supply chains with friendly countries. The second is a defense acquisition procedure. We've had problems of L1. You can't be quoting on L1 and buying equipment based on L1. And we've seen what the problems are. So I think this comprehensive defense acquisition procedure is positive and something that we hope will continue to get refined. And the third is the strategic partnership models for augmenting existing public sector capabilities of major segments of fighter, aircraft, helicopters, etc. There's IDEX, there's TDF. And one thing I really liked in the previous budget, allocation of 25% of the R&D budget for academia, private industry, and startups. So if we look at this entire policy framework, I think there's something that we can work together, government, industry, academia, research laboratories in a very positive way. But we need the time, and I think we'll get there. Thank you very much, Sanjeev.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's been great, and I think one of the important things that comes out is that, we were looking at things in binaries. That this versus this, agriculture versus industry, industry versus manufacturing, government versus the private sector versus this. I think the time has come when, and as you said, if nations go to war, then nations have actually got to get together. We are fortunate, we have some time on hand, so maybe we can open the floor for 2 or 3 questions. Just 2 or 3 questions, 1 or 2 to, yes sir, please.
Myself, Amay Sakri, I'm a journalist. As you said that US and Europe might go into recession, and I think even increasing of interest rates, I think they are also not helping the cause till today. Sir, how do you see India secure from all this, or it is immune from all these problems?
So, hello. So India is not immune to what happens in the rest of the world. I think we should dispel the notion we are decoupled. We are very integrated economy. Our manufacturing cycles are very coterminous. If you see the export of goods and services together, we are as open as the United States. If you see the ratio of the GDP, it is higher than that of the United States. So there's no way we should think that we would be decoupled. But what we have done is we have built macro financial stability of late. We have had good policies to do that, and that should hold us in good stead. We have had good reserve buffers, so buffers exist, and we can tide over the cycle, but we need to be very careful. And I won't completely dispute with my co-panelist who said that we need to be careful on what we import, but we can't return to a state of protectionism very much. So we have to, in fact, exude confidence. We have to keep things open, not impose capital controls unnecessarily, because I think we can pass this cycle in some fashion, even when there is slowdown next year of the global economy. The world is willing to invest in India. We should nurture that by having the right policies. And by right policies, I do not mean that we should be protectionist. I mean, we can have PLI, yes, but PLI should be, as there's a competitive element in PLI, that is what we should encourage. So at the end of it, we have to think, if we are making things make in India, are we doing it efficiently? So if we are replacing the least cost source of product from whether outside or any free trade area which we might join by less efficient production from at home, there is a consumer welfare loss, and that policy is not acceptable. I think even when we took a decisions on joining some of the or walking out of the free trade association, yeah, so we didn't quite calculate very closely of what the trade and welfare losses are involved in it. So we need to do good research work. We need to do good grounding in planning the strategy around this angle.
Just a supplementary, sir. Yeah.
There are two other questions. So maybe we'll go with Mr. Dinesh Trivedi, sir.
I can speak.
Yes, sir.
No, I fully appreciate what the panelists had to say, and I'm totally in agreement. I just have one observation when you mentioned about research. I think one of two areas which are very important to any nation is health and education. And I think it's time that our talent really does a lot of research, which at the moment they are doing at Silicon Valley. And that is the crux. And second thing, when you mention about the GDP debt ratio, would you agree that India is a little fortunate that it is below 100, which is all domestic debt, whereas most of the nation, including America, is 300, and which is international. Lastly, one of the observations which I have, the world is shifting from financial economy to political economy. And it is especially post-COVID, when government started giving money and stuff like that. So the supply of money now is not going to be decided by Fed or RBI. It's going to be decided world over by the political necessity. That was my observation, if you have anything to say. Thank you.
What I suggest is let's take all the questions, because otherwise it will be difficult. Sir.
My question is to you. You think at 2.6 trillion, which is our GDP, and it grows at under 4 or 5 over the next several years, and America is, I think, at about 19 trillion. So at a percentage level, they kick in a lot more in absolute on a much larger base. Will this provide for what we want to do in 2047, in the sense that will we have enough for education, healthcare, defense? How do you see that? That's one. And the second is, how do you see the distribution of wealth in India? It's pretty skewed, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
I've just these two questions. I mean, are we sort of living in a, are we being, sort of optimistic? Are we on thin ice? Where are we?
I won't say we are on thin ice, but yes, you have really hit the nail here. In terms of the numbers, what you were citing, it's important to compare nominal numbers with nominal numbers and real numbers with real numbers. So yes, on the nominal numbers also, like I don't see convergence occurring anytime soon. At least I don't see in any foreseeable future a convergence in terms of per capita GDP, for instance. We would grow faster. I think 4% is quite an underestimate. We are pretty capable of growing 6% plus in real terms. And in nominal terms, if we keep inflation at 4%, which should be our target, we could hit a 10% nominal GDP growth, which will sort of be faster than most of the advanced economies for sure. Inequalities, yes, that's a big issue. In the pandemic, my sense is inequalities has gone up. The last word on this is not written because we have had two sets of research coming in, some to show that government intervention programs have actually helped improve the distribution. But I think till the consumption expenditure round data is available, I would hold my opinion on it. Unfortunately, we tanked the last consumption expenditure round. So I think we are looking forward to that number to understand this better. But I think we need more equitous policy. So what we are doing here is we are harping on financial inclusion. Digital financial inclusion could be a very big step forward. The retail payment revolution which India has seen is unparalleled, and the India stack model can be copied. I mean, there's demand from the rest of the world to copy it, and we could leverage that to reduce the income inequalities. There are other governmental intervention programs, but we need to see. So growth would come. See, today we have 107 unicorns, and that's pretty large. We are among the 3 biggest countries with unicorns, and the valuation is like $341 billion US dollars. It's not a small sum. Most of them have come in last 1.5 years. 66 of them have come up in the last 1.5 years. We could see more of them coming up. The startups are coming very strongly. There are 77,000 startups registered with the DIPT, and that's not a small number. So India would dynamically grow. There is very little doubt that that will happen. But let me come to the other questions which you sort of raised. Sorry, which was your most important question, I think?
No, I was talking about debt GDP ratio.
Yeah, so debt GDP ratio, again, the numbers like for US is like 134% of GDP at the moment. Japan is the highest at 236% of the GDP in gross terms. But let's not compare those numbers with ours because they don't have a financing constraints. The markets would finance their deficit at any stage. The market finance will be cut off for countries like India whenever there is a rate cycle tightening and capital flow outflows occur. So we face that capital volatility. So our sustainability numbers could be very different from sustainability numbers which these countries enjoy. And there is no option but to have a program to reduce these debt levels in a very significant way. I think we need to create that fiscal space.
Thank you very much, sir. Last question, sir.
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Vipin Sondhi. Firstly, it's a very wonderful coverage that you gave. Since you have worked in 2 industries, both of them are big suppliers to the defense. In fact, I recollect when we had the Uri and what was to happen after that, your predecessor had come and told us that I will send teams all over the place to look after your transport fleet. So we are quite aware of what you guys have been doing for defense. I want to get an industry perspective from you because you mentioned about L1, you mentioned about support to the industry for R&D. Do you get a sense that we are overheating the environment by insisting on too much of competition between suppliers? can we find a way by which we reduce the competition, trying to get 3, 4 potential suppliers and then seeking out L1? Can there be a different model by which you promote, some equivalence of strategic partnership to reduce the heat of competition and get better delivery?
I'll try and answer that. No, I think competition is to be encouraged. First, let me try and I will come to your point, but I'll come to Mridul's first. That does industry want protectionism, and therefore no. So the answer is no. I think it's extremely important, and what's made us competitive from 1991 is purely the reduction in tariff rates. There have been some reversal, but let's say large industry is no longer asking for it, and it shouldn't be done. The important thing is that if there is an incentive being given now, it should have a clear sunset clause, and industry must ensure that within that time period of 5 years, 10 years, policy remains consistent. And if we don't come up to scratch, then that incentive goes. But you will find industry will do it because there's a hunger for it. I think that's important. Now, as far as your specific question, I think L1 is really to do with lack of quality. And that's the sad part. The sad part is that we should have a clear quality benchmark. In some cases hasn't been touched for a long, long time. Please keep raising the quality benchmark. You'll find a lot of people will go out during the pre-qualification stage. Then by all means have L1. But the bar must be raised to global quality levels. Anybody who can't supply, too bad. And that's the way I would encourage the way we buy defense equipment or any other equipment. The other is, so whether it's Ashok Leyland or JCB, it's a matter of pride to supply to the defense. We are all Indians, and it's a matter of pride. So we don't even need to discuss that. Except that if you make a certain return, you can invest it in R&D, etc. I want to come therefore to 3 takeaways, 3 suggestions. Trivedi Saab, you wonderfully said about innovation and R&D. We as industry are guilty of not spending enough on R&D, which is why every 5 years or 10 years we end up going and getting technology from overseas. By all means, let everybody come and work in India, but technology is still not ours. And I think that's extremely important. To give you some numbers, India's national spend on R&D is 0.7% of GDP. Korea is 4.5 percentage points. China is 2.5 percentage points. And these are of much larger GDPs. We are talking of them being at $15 to $20 trillion. You said $20 trillion. USA is probably at $28 or $29 trillion right now. So we have to go ahead. Secondly, we are saying to government, and we are working with the principal scientific advisor, government should spend less, but enable and fund. And let the startups, let industry, let them spend on R&D. And let academic institutions, they are our cheapest resource. And as you said, they go to Silicon Valley. If we can give them, industry can give them adequate incentive, they will stay here and definitely invest in R&D here. But we need to provide them with the facility.
Sorry, Mr. Sondhi, can I ask you questions on this?
Let me just finish.
Okay.
Government spending on R&D must come down. And we are also working to make research laboratories of the government more accountable. I think that is extremely important. The third is raw material supply chains. I think raw material supply chains, at least with friendly countries, must be enabled, must be moved forward. I think exports, defense, what we supply to defense is lumpy. It happens every few years, etc. We've got to make sure that we are competitive as a nation to be able to export defense equipment to friendly countries. That way we'll have a very balanced manufacturing capability. And these are some of the points, I think, that we need to work upon. But I'm happy to try and answer any more questions.
Okay. Let me come. It was really music to the ear when you said the industry doesn't want protectionism, and that's really what will be making India's future, I believe. I mean, this is a very important statement we had. But then when I reflect back, when we walked out of the RCEP negotiations, did any of the industry in India said, no, we want to join the RCEP, we want to be competitive? we want to have more efficient competition. When you have this idea of military industrial complex, my worry comes something called what is the Concord fallacy in public choice theory. So you keep on investing in a bid. You think you can generate an excellent equipment of your own, and eventually you realize you have sunk so much of money, you can neither walk out of it nor produce an efficient thing. How do we ensure that the Concord fallacy does not occur in India? So these are some of the thoughts which come to my mind when you are saying.
I think it's a general statement. So
But I can just say that RCEP,
RCEP, one of the biggest, I mean, it was more than industry, it was the agricultural sector and the dairying industry which did not want it. And I think here, for all the good that Amul and NDDB have done, at that point of time, they were really, really, really scared. So I think it was more the Ministry of Agriculture, more the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, which were opposed to RECP, than the industry, because I was involved in the Ministry of Agriculture at that point. So that is there is also the other aspect about India's agriculture and on the view that we take about our agriculture. Are we looking at our agriculture as just a self-sustaining agriculture? Are we looking at our agriculture as produce in India, feed the world? And something which did not come up today but needs to come up is that we cannot continue with our agriculture the way we've been doing it. Agriculture cannot be a holy cow. You cannot have a modern economy, and I think we need to put it on record. I have put it on record in Prakash Nanda's magazine that the farm bills were actually positive. We needed to do it. And I think it was very wrong of the government to have caved in under pressure, because you cannot have a peasant model of economy going with aerospace industry. You cannot do it. If everything is getting transformed and everything is getting transformed, how can you hold agriculture and say you will do what it is? You cannot be a peasant in a modern day economy. So that is one thing. The second thing which I wanted to say is L1, and I agree with him, L1 is a function of lazy bureaucracies and lazy politicians. I added you, sir, because essentially it is our fault. L1 is a function because we haven't applied our minds enough. L1 is a problem because we have not laid down the standards. If we want a certain thing and we are very clear about what the technical specs are going to be, then L1 is not a problem. And I've seen this happening in Mission Karmayogi, in many other things. You just say a very simple thing, I want an educational video, give me the cheapest. How can you have a cheapest, how can you quantify, for example, poetry or literature festivals or these seminars? You can't do it. You can't go in for a competitive bidding and say, that how does WOW compete with JLF or this? These are very different things. So I think L1 is, the difficulties with L1 are also overhyped. It's a problem of not knowing what is it that we want. We could go on and on, like all panels can go on and on. One sentence? It's a challenge, Prakash, if you close in one sentence. Over to you.
Specifically, I will request Mr. Trivedi to answer this, not the panelists. The whole point is that, as Mr. Sondhi said, 18% manufacturing sector, it should go to 25, and we know that service sector, is above 50%. The lowest, contribution to our GDP comes from agriculture, 13% or 14%. But can our Indian politics or Indian politicians survive without the support of these 13% contributors? Why are they literally, quote unquote, slaves to all those who make this demand or exert this pressure in the name of these farmers?
I think the opportunity, I'm glad he asked me specifically, because I was indeed wanting to talk about agriculture. I am a farmer. And farmers in India are bhikharis. Between the chemical supply and the mandi, they are the ones who earn. Farmers can never earn in India, and that's why they commit suicide. If a farmer in a country is a bhikhari, then the country also is a bhikhari. And it is high time the economists of the country understand the pain of a farmer. You are asking a farmer to join manufacturing and do the labor job, which is not competent. He can do 24 hours job in a farm because he's competent. And today, India's main thing is knowledge and agriculture. And I personally feel, as an experience, I can afford, because I have little money from my ancestors, that put in that money. But a farmer always sells in distress to the mandi. And I totally agree that these laws were for the farmers. Because of, I don't want to get into the details of that, it is not the forum also, but I think collectively, if you want to make India strong, today India is strong because there are 3 times more buffer stock than we require.
Absolutely.
And that is where I personally feel L1 is a fraud. I'm sorry to use that word. I was a railway minister and I made sure that I bypassed the L1. And how did I do that? I had all the tenders of the small bridges. People will quote and run away. So I said, combine all the bridges and make a tender of more than 1,000 crore. And I totally agree that unless and until quality is there, L1 has to get out.
Thank you, sirs. So with this fairly positive note, maybe one line to each of my co-panelists, and then we'll vacate the space for the next session.
No, I just think we should look at the next 25 years with great hope, and this is a great forum to evaluate how we are making this progress every year. Securing India at 100 is a key question that we need to ask.
Thank you.
I think we have a very bright future, but it all depends on what we do. So if we continue to act in that spirit, we resolve, we turn competitive, we sort of improve our investments, we have the culture, and we take care of agriculturalists and the one who are excluded from this growth, particularly, we will succeed.
Spoken like a true economist. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much. I request bags to be passed on, please.